Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast, Alexander Philippe.
Hey, how are you, man?
Really good to have you here.
Always good to see you.
Always good to see you,
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Your film, Leap of Faith, William Friedkin on The Exorcist, premieres at Sundance. This is now, in a way, I would say third in a trilogy of pop culture documentaries, but your work has sort of all been leading to this. I feel in a way you do these, for those that don't know, director of The People vs. George Lucas, Memory, The Origins of Alien, and
7852.
7852.
Doc of the Dead.
Doc of the Dead. Yes.
Yeah.
This is, are you going for 9 films now? 9 films. But this, for those who have not seen the 1973 The Exorcist, I believe it's just as frightening today as it was when it first came out. I still have trouble eating pea soup, as many of the people who... but the thing is this, how did you gain William Friedkin's trust to talk about this movie in a way we've never heard anyone talk about The Exorcist?
You know, it's actually a really kind of crazy story because I was touring with 7852, a couple of years ago now, and I saw he was the guest of honor at a festival in Strasbourg in France. And I really wanted to meet him, and he was not in the mood to meet anybody. And I talked to the festival director, and he was like, he's not going to talk to anybody. And I was like, fine, So I saw him in the distance, and I was like, okay, well, I'm never going to meet William Friedkin, but at least I've seen him, and then, a few weeks later, I was in Sitges in Spain at this, which is the largest fantastic film fest in the world. And he was also the guest of honor there. And I was screening 1752, and through serendipity, I was having lunch with Gary Sherman, and I hear in the middle of lunch a voice behind my back that says, "Hey, Alex," and I turn around and it's William Friedkin. I'm like, what's going on? And he says, come over here. I want to tell you some stories about Hitchcock. So, of course, I joined the table, and, he told me he'd heard a lot about 7852, and he wanted to see it. So he grabbed my phone, and he said, here's my email. Send me the film right away. I want to watch it. I said, okay. So I sent him the film, and then, he responded right away. He absolutely loved it. And he said, look, when you're in LA next time, I want to buy you lunch. Okay. So 3 weeks later, I'm in LA, I'm having lunch with William Friedkin, and I'm kind of like pinching myself. I'm like, what is going on, And it's really interesting because at the time I was thinking I really wanted to interview him for what would become Memory, for my film on Alien. And but he didn't respond to that, and the conversation switched very quickly to The Exorcist. And he started talking about his archives and all the stuff that he has. And he said, if you wanted to have access to this, I'd give you access. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he said, well, why don't you read my autobiography? And if you find an angle, just let me know. So, of course, I immediately went to Barnes & Noble, and I got the book, and I read it, and it's a fantastic read. It's just a great, great book.
Well, Friedkin's like one of those old school directors that, he's a man's man. In fact, in one part in the documentary, he talks about trying to get a performance out of a particular actor, and he was not giving a particularly good performance, and he just hit him.
Yeah.
Smacked him, hit him hard. He goes, and then throws him in front of the camera and says, action.
Yeah.
And he smacked him. He was so shocked, and he ended up giving a great performance. But he said, you can't really do that these days.
Right.
But this was the old days where a director to get a performance would actually smack an actor.
Yeah, it was a very sort of macho kind of attitude, which obviously wouldn't, and I'm glad that he acknowledges that you could not do this today,
Right,
But not only that, but he wasn't an actor. It was a priest that he slapped, and like an actual priest, it's pretty hardcore stuff. But so anyway, so I read his autobiography, and I said, look, there's obviously a lot that's been done about The Exorcist, and I would want to approach it completely differently. And I basically proposed an approach similar to the Hitchcock-Truffaut model of interviews, where we would sit down over a period of days and literally deep dive into every thought, technique, his philosophy, just everything about. We would crack open The Exorcist and make it a really sort of personal film. And I mean, to me, it was this instant, like, it has to be just him. And I don't want to talk about special effects. I want to talk about The Exorcist through the lens of fine art, classical music, classic cinema, the stuff that he's really interested in, to really get to the bottom of his artistic process. And that's, and so he immediately said yes. And, we started with 3 full days of interviews. It turned into ultimately 6 days of interviews. And I think that, he's certainly opened up in a way that I don't think we've ever seen him.
Well, it's like a master class in William Friedkin and the film The Exorcist.
Sure.
And, I mean, I learned things about the movie that I didn't know. I mean, I'm a big fan of, the behind the scenes DVD extras.
Right.
It tells you how they did this in this movie and that movie.
Right.
But mostly those are so surface level, and everybody's just sort of glad handing each other, saying things like, it was so great to work with so-and-so. It was so amazing.
Right.
But not just this film, but other films you have made in this vein take such a deep dive. It's like a dissection of the artistic process, because Friedkin gets into his own head about what the influences are. And this is my fear, because I want to talk about Star Wars later.
We'll talk about Star Wars, sure.
Because of People versus George Lucas, and because of what's happened now. I'm really curious about your thoughts about the sequels. But what I love about it is that I feel movies today are just influenced by other movies. And I feel like in Friedkin's time and in the 70s, the golden age of American filmmaking, all those influences came from other places. It came from music. It came from poetry, literature, fine art, history. And I feel today going forward, all the Star Wars movies are just going to be influenced by the previous Star Wars movies, as we saw with the sequels, whereas the original films were influenced by so many other things. And Friedkin just reminded me, like, this great period of film. And what I love is he didn't understand, even as he's trying to dissect the process, didn't understand why he made certain decisions.
I know. And that's, a couple of things about that. I mean, I think, first of all, I think Friedkin is truly a Renaissance man. I mean, I've had, beyond the 6 days of interviews, I've had multiple conversations and lunches with him, and he knows so much about history, about music, about opera, about cinema, about fine art. I could just listen to him all day. He is so incredibly knowledgeable and thoughtful about everything that he does. And I think that's the reason why, you're looking at The Exorcist, and it's funny because we do think of it, of course, as a terrifying film, which it is. We think about the special effects and all that stuff. But that's not what makes The Exorcist great. What makes The Exorcist great is that fundamentally it's a film about love. It's a film about guilt. It's a film about faith and fate. And it's a film about these really complex human emotions. And it's a film that, in terms of his techniques and his approach and his thought, is so profound and so accomplished in every level. And I think that's why the film continues to resonate today.
Well, especially a lot of the things, like, I had forgotten in watching the documentary. I mean, some of the stuff that you hear Linda Blair say when she's in that zone. And I didn't know there's a voice actress that did that. There's an actress who did the voice of Linda Blair.
Right. Mercedes McCambridge.
Oh my God. The process to get her to get to that voice. I mean, you got to explain. It's crazy. She she smoked. She had to drink raw eggs, and then she wanted to be tied to a chair.
And drink a lot of booze, a lot of whiskey.
And she had given up booze.
Yeah. No, I mean, it was just extraordinary what she basically told Friedkin, like, I'm going to have to, if you want me to go there, this is what I'm going to have to do. And she was, if you look at some of the, the past roles that she's had, you can see that she was this really, she liked to take on roles that, were not really common in Hollywood at the time, for sure. Certainly not for a woman.
But I've never heard that. I mean, you hear different actors explain the process or how they work with certain directors.
Right.
That I had never heard. Another interesting thing, the beginning of the film, the way it begins, there's this sort of searing underneath the surface sound, which is basically fingers on a wine glass.
That's right.
I never knew this.
Yeah. It's all these little details. And, we talked that the opening sequence in Iraq, which is about 10 minutes in the film, I spent the entire first day of interviews just talking about this. I mean, there's so much to say there. And if you think about, really his approach. It's completely non-narrative in a way. It's an opening that gets under your skin, that introduces a number of elements that of course will, pay off later on. But it's not an opening that I think Hollywood would do today. In fact, back in the day, they didn't want him to do it. A lot of people said, this is crazy. Nobody wants this. But he was really, thank goodness, he was really stubborn about doing it, because this is the way that it opens in the book. And he felt that it was going to translate, cinematically. And what a great opening. I mean, of course, I think also about the opening of 2001, which is also this weird, like, what is going on? Where am I? I mean, this is supposed to be a space odyssey, and here I am with a bunch of apes, like, right. What is going on? But I think that's this idea of introducing a movie pretty much through tone and mood is something that you don't see a whole lot today. And I think when it's done like that, it's so great.
Well, it's interesting because that was a real archaeological dig that was happening when Max von Sydow was, traversing through this area where they had dug up. I guess it was a site where people were beheaded, and they not just beheaded the people, they beheaded the statues.
The statues, right. There were all these, heads of statues, which is incredible. Yeah, it was I believe it was a German dig. There were some German archaeologists, and just the whole process of asking for permission to film there. He spent a lot of time also just in pre-production in Iraq, and was held hostage actually for a few days. There's some wild sort of like behind the scenes stories that I didn't have time to expand upon, in Leap of Faith, which were really not part of the particular narrative, but I'm sure you could write a whole book on just his time in Iraq.
That setting up the tone was like a perfect. I'm glad that he fought for that to continue.
Me
to be in it.
Me too. Yeah. So it's one of the great openings, really, in movies.
One of the things he also talks about is the problem that people have with the ending.
Yes.
The ending of the film is. I'm not a religious person.
Yeah. Neither am I.
So I found that really interesting. That we're gonna So that this is an issue. Like if you cannot commit suicide, right? If you commit suicide, you're not going to heaven.
Well, the idea, right? Exactly. The idea that a Catholic priest would essentially, and this was Friedkin's argument, that with William Blatty, who wrote the book, that throwing himself out the window in this particular fashion is suicide, which is a sin in the eyes of the Catholic Church.
Right.
They kept having this argument, and again, I don't want to completely give it away, because there's literally a 5-minute sequence in Leap of Faith where you see, Friedkin sort of really wrestling with this idea and the way that he was arguing with Blatty about it. But he never, as he said, he never fully understood what he was filming and how it was going to translate, and he sees it as a flaw. I mean, this is one of the great sort of climaxes in the history of movies, which, as he says, most people, millions of people around the world, have embraced it and have their own meaning there, but he himself as a director struggles with it. I think it's so healthy, by the way, for a great director like Friedkin to come out and say something like this, because you think about the young directors now, the young generation of filmmakers who tend to idolize, rightfully, of course, the Friedkins and Scorseses and so on and so forth, right? Jane Campions of the world. But, they're also human beings, and they make mistakes, and, they have made, artistic choices that they're not completely sure about to this day. So to see him wrestle with that, I thought was a really beautiful moment to capture and to share, because hopefully I think it will make younger generations of filmmakers realize, it's okay sometimes to mess up. It's okay to struggle with it and to not be sure, So.
I mean, it worked for me, but I wouldn't be struggling with the religious issues in it. And it was still frightening. Like, to me, The Exorcist and The Omen are these films that kind of built on this religious dogma, right, as a source of fear. And there's a couple things that I know you didn't get into too many technical aspects in your interviews with them, but there are a couple things I found fascinating that I didn't realize. Dick Smith, who's a legendary makeup effects artist in Hollywood, did this initial makeup design that he didn't like.
Yeah.
but he's still used in a way that was so effective.
Yeah.
I forgot like how that kind of just plays on the tone, which are these flashes of a face.
Yes. These subliminals, which he says that this is something that he first saw in the films by, Alain Resnais, which, like last year at Marienbad or, those kinds of films, which made a profound effect on him. I mean, you really see, and this is what I love about Friedkin, is that you really see in The Exorcist a lot of the films, influences from a lot of the films that had a major impact on him. So it's almost like it's a blueprint for understanding him as a filmmaker and what had an effect on him. Of course, Carl Theodor Dreyer, specifically the movie. It's spelled Ordette, but it's actually pronounced Ord, which is he claims really the only film that had a direct influence on The Exorcist. Citizen Kane, which is his, the film that he reveres the most. I mean, you can go down the list. 2001, we talked about that. So all of those films, all of those filmmakers had a direct influence on The Exorcist.
Well, I want to circle back to Leap of Faith because I want to not forget to get to. I have a lot of questions. I have questions and I write them down.
Okay.
And more like topics that I want to make sure to get to.
Sure.
So a couple of things. The number one question I always get: your film is playing at Sundance.
Yep.
And having written a book years ago, The Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide, which I'm sure you can still get somewhere. I'm not trying to plug it or anything, but there's a number one question that I always get, and you've had 3 films at Sundance. Yeah. How do you get a movie into Sundance? And maybe you want to sort of. You're now a veteran of Sundance. You're a Sundance alum. You're a Sundance alum.
Right.
So I feel like your movies are looked at more carefully and given favor because you've had films at the festival before.
Right.
But how do you get a movie into Sundance? And it's a different answer for every filmmaker I've talked to.
I don't know that I have an answer to that. I mean, it took me, first of all, it took many years to get the first one, which was 7852 into Sundance. And I know now, after having talked to the programmers, that we came close a couple of times.
So before that, you had other films.
Yeah, that came close. I know that Dark of the Dead came very close. Apparently.
People versus George Lucas.
Well, we actually did. We were not going to be done on time, so we
that premiered at South by.
It premiered at South by. It was a fantastic premiere, there. So, but there were some shorts before that we submitted that were shortlisted as well, and so it took a long time. And I think I think for a lot of filmmakers. Sundance will, they will, I think they're looking for the longevity of a filmmaker, probably. I mean, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they're looking for that. They want to see like how much you've got in you to keep making films. And I think they felt, and that's what they told me. They felt that 7852 was really the film that, felt like a perfect fit, but you've had one film at Sundance. I mean, if you look at the competition, honestly, like I thought, I don't know how long it's going to take to get another film at Sundance. It may never happen again,
Well, you look at the types of documentaries that normally play Sundance. Mostly documentaries attacking a social issue, taking on something in society. Not something that I guess I would classify yours more in the pop culture realm or sort of cinema taking a look at itself, which I personally love. I just didn't realize the Sundance crowd really liked it. I mean, it's like, there's a whole, genre on YouTube of movies that do film analysis, and some of them are good. This is beyond because you have access to so many of the people involved. Memory.
Yes.
The Origins of Alien, which oddly enough, we have here on the shelf. You called it out. A candle of a chest burster.
Pretty sweet.
Which is pretty awesome.
Yeah,
but
it is pretty sweet.
But this memory not only discusses Alien and Ridley Scott and what it's sort of what led to the chestburster scene, what was in Dan O'Bannon's brain and what was in the zeitgeist at the time, and how that chestburster scene. Why in cinema I could think of like 2 of maybe 3 shocking moments: Exorcist, which Linda Blair spewing green soup stuff. The scene in Dawn of the Dead where you see the head explode. I feel that like that was a milestone. And the chestburster scene. I don't know that we've seen anything since.
The psycho shower scene, obviously, but
what's that? The
psycho shower scene.
The psycho shower scene, yes. But like these are ones that like change the game forever. But there's something.
There's very few. Yeah.
you really get into in memory, which if you have not seen this film, I know it's available VOD, and I mean it's
the whole deal,
commercially available.
It's out there. Yep.
You take this deep dive into the chestburster scene that is amazing, that like really explains why this psychologically kind of works on us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in meaning. I'm interested in culture. I'm interested in, you know, sometimes even like, you know, slightly more esoteric ideas about, you know, how we you know, perceive movies as a collective. You know, I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, you know, Memory is very much it's a film about our collective unconscious. It's a mythological take on Alien. It's a film that explores some poetic connections between the xenomorph and the furies of Greek mythology. It's all of that stuff. I mean, those are the films I like to make. You know, I think that there's a lot of people out there who make great, as you said, behind the scenes or, you know, making of films. That's not the reason why I make movies. I really like to dig deeper into these very profound connections that we have with those films and why they resonate with culture and why they resonate with us and what makes them so great. So it's almost like it's not film studies because, you know, there's a risk. There's always a danger if you go in that direction that it's going to be, you know, too dry or scholarly or whatever. I really want to create that bridge and make those films accessible and enjoyable for the general public, but then hopefully blow their minds and make them think about much deeper ideas than they would get from, you know, a behind the scenes doc.
Well, you have kids at all? I don't know.
I don't. No.
I have 2 kids. I was in the delivery room during both births, and I would always describe to my friends, because the way that birth is portrayed in any film,
sure,
it's this beautiful process, and the baby comes out, and it's just like it's glistening, you know. And it's the reality is, and I remember describing to my friends what seeing my kids born was like, and I said it's like the chestburster scene in Alien, but with more blood. And but it's true. And
sure.
We're talking about natural childbirth, right?
Sure,
like
sure, of course, yeah.
There's a lot of gruesome stuff that. Yeah, if you know, there's also there's a film from the 70s called Casey's Shadow, in which they show a horse being born. That one is also, I remember Casey's Shadow. Yeah, it's you need to look up that film if you're a fan of horse racing movies. But like I remember describing that to my friends, and it stuck with me. It's just like, wow, this is sort of, and I feel like that's also why it's such a frightening thing, because as men, we don't get pregnant.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. And the idea of giving birth or having this thing inside of us that can just say, I want out. I want out. I want out. Get me
and
out
I think that's why men really had a visceral reaction to this movie. I mean, I've been told countless stories now of, you know, from men who were there when in the theater, who sensed, you know, when Kane starts feeling sick, that they sensed that something was about to happen, and they ran to the bathroom, and there were a bunch of men there. You had the same story.
I had the same story.
Well, there you go.
I was at the Americana Theater in Detroit.
It's incredible.
And with a bunch of, people ran to hide from what was about to happen. It's just that film is such a, like, I've seen almost everything about the behind the scenes of Alien, and thought that there was nothing more to mine from that. And the fact that you take this sort of like psychological a look at, like, well, why did this movie resonate?
Right.
And I'm just saying thank you for doing that.
Oh no, it's been fun, you know, and it's you know, to me it was really that story, and again, without giving it away, but it's that really fascinating connection between the chestburster and this triptych by Francis Bacon, which, you know, Ridley Scott showed Giger, and you see the chestburster in that. And again, there's a lot of connecting points there between that particular triptych and what you see in the film, which for me as a filmmaker, that's the kind of stuff that I'm really curious to explore, because I believe in this idea of you know, there are sometimes meanings that escape the makers of the film, and I think that there was a really unique symbiosis that happened between O'Bannon, Giger, and Scott. And that movie was happening on a level that was not fully conscious. And I think that's why it's so great.
See, that's what you tap into, is that conversation. The artist, and Friedkin in Leap of Faith is kind of in a way having a conversation with himself about the film, because he hasn't thought about it as deeply as your questions kind of pushed him to that point to have the conversation with himself and to kind of like, because we think of like filmmakers as like they have answers to all the questions.
Right.
This means this and this symbolizes that, and look at this Easter egg, and that's just such surface level BS that when you really sort of break it down, like these are why these films resonated at the time, and why I think there's a lack of films that resonate today in the sense that culture is so divided in so many ways, which is why there isn't like this is the big movie that we all agree that it's talking about the things that are substantive today. And as much as like there are some great films nominated for Oscars, I don't know that there's one you could point to and go, that movie resonated, that is talking about what's in the now. Is it that we just, is it because the studio factory filmmaking, as it's called by Francis Ford Coppola, that the studio filmmaking's kind of taken over, and there's this sort of like committee and the marketing and the date is set, and there's not that sort of like, let's let these ideas germinate. And it was interesting to talk about Friedkin because there was a casting change that was made in the film.
Right.
I don't want to get into it, but like I found it really amazing that he really had control over this project in the sense that he was going with his gut on so many of the choices.
Oh yeah, and he's a very, very intuitive filmmaker as well. And as he said, there's a lot of stuff that he doesn't even, interpretations of the film now that he wasn't consciously thinking about, right. But that's the beauty of it. I mean, I will say though, I mean, of course, making any film is difficult. I'm sure working within the studio system is extremely difficult because you're dealing with executives and. I would like to live in a world where filmmakers could just make their films. We could let them make their films the way they want. It's not always possible. It's not always easy. But I will say that I think 2019 was a pretty good year. I mean, you're looking at movies like The Lighthouse. By the way, a film that absolutely blew me away, and I'm so glad to even see it on the radar, is I Lost My Body. This French animation film, which is one. I mean, for me, it's easily the film of the decade. It's a film that I walked out of the theater. I couldn't speak. I was so moved and shaken by it. It's an extraordinary piece of filmmaking. But like Uncut Gems. I mean, you want to talk about like filmmakers taking risks. Oh my God! Those are the kinds of films that excite me. And for me, filmmaking, well, any art form is about taking risks. And I think. Oftentimes you see Hollywood, especially the franchise system, is, I hate to say it, it's boring because they're not taking risks. I think the exciting stuff is you take a risk and you have to be willing to fail. Well,
I mean, those films, I mean, Uncut Gems is my personal favorite film of the year. I think the Safdie brothers. And Adam Sandler, I mean, whatever you think of Adam Sandler, that performance, the Academy blew it.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's a film. This is the amazing thing about this is it's a film that is designed to annoy you.
right.
And how hard is it to do that? I remember, like during the first 15 minutes, because you have this score that is really annoying and it gets under your skin. And I was like, okay, what's going on? What are they trying to do here? Okay, they're trying to annoy me. Okay, I'm going to go along with it and see what happens. But it pays off in so many beautiful ways. They could have messed up that movie in so many ways. And just the way they shoot it too. I mean, everything about it is such a risk. Like, kudos to these guys.
But here's the disappointment for me, just as a lifelong fan of movies, is, and especially ones that take these risks, is Lighthouse for all its artistic success and Uncut Gems for all its artistic success. These movies are not. They're not blowing up in the larger mainstream sense, and I think have we just dumbed down audiences where because I really because you and I know could talk about Star Wars all day, and we will, because I have questions. I have questions to talk about People versus George Lucas, but I think that if you have a balanced media diet. I feel like maybe the disappointment that you may have had if you saw The Rise of Skywalker and were not blown away by that movie. I feel like it would be tempered by the fact that there's so many other choices out there, and I think that there's a whole. And I feel really bad because some of my favorite people who comment on movies are so disappointed in Star Wars or disappointed in DC or disappointed in Marvel, and I'm like, you need to watch other movies.
Well, look, there's this thing called the Criterion Channel, by the way,
right, yes,
which
exactly.
which is amazing, and it exists, and you could spend. You could watch 5 movies a day on the Criterion Channel and not even come close to what the great stuff that exists. I'm not saying just watch old movies,
right.
But there are great movies out there, and I think I just wish we could move away from this culture of good enough. Good enough is not good enough. There's greatness out there. Let's go get it. Let's go find it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is you made People versus George Lucas. Could I just ask you?
Sure.
Could you do like Leap of Faith? But with George Lucas, there's never been George Lucas.
I would love to.
George Lucas. How do we make this happen? Because George Lucas has been interviewed so many times. He's been interviewed so many times, and he's very diplomatic.
Yeah.
He's very complimentary of everyone. And the one thing he doesn't get credit for is that he spread the love. When Star Wars first came out, you knew who Ben Burtt was. You knew who John Dykstra was. You knew these names, even though Dykstra and he had their issues. You knew who John Williams was. That this was it was the first time I realized that filmmaking is a team sport, and that there are all different kinds of players in this orchestra making movies. Yeah. I feel like that's the get. Okay, but People versus George Lucas. I remember when this movie came out at South by Southwest. I'm in it briefly in the movie.
You are, yeah.
Whatever. I have one funny line, maybe 2, but
you had some great lines. Yeah.
But I remember I was working for G4 TV at the time, and they had a relationship with Lucasfilm and wanted to know. So you're going to this movie? We're at South by. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go see this movie. I mean, I'm just going to check it out. Just tell us what it's like. Just tell us, because they were trying to do some things with Lucasfilm, which is whatever. I have nothing to do with that. I'm just the movie guy, right? But I think that movie is, forget the title. Yeah. It's a love letter to George Lucas.
Absolutely. And I from what I hear through the grapevine, I don't think he sees it this way. I would like him to see it this way. Maybe one day he will. I don't know. I've never spoken to the guy. We tried. But I mean, it's an honest look at the relationship, the very dysfunctional relationship that exists between George and his fans. I mean, this is real stuff. Like, this is not, I didn't invent it. It exists, you know?
I mean, so the good thing is fans rarely complain about Star Wars now. They just no. I feel like there's actually a whole cottage industry of commentators who just bitch about Star Wars all the time. They're not unjustified. Many of the complaints are more about the sort of corporatization of the brand and the having to check so many boxes that it satisfies every agenda, which I do think is kind of bullshit, because the only box that really needs to be checked is fun. And then I feel like the stories need to be timeless. And I don't know that was achieved with the sequels. So is it fair to ask you what you thought about the Star Wars sequels? Look,
I don't want to hurt people's feelings. Okay.
This is your personal take. Take.
Well, but the moment that, you say something about Star Wars, right?
This is going to be a headline on BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed and Vice are going to do a story on what Alexander Philippe, the director of the People vs. George Lucas, thinks of the Star Wars sequels, as they're called sometimes, the Disney Star Wars.
The Disney Star Wars.
I
think they're fine, but that's my problem in general with with franchises, is that I think they're playing it so safe, right. And I actually waited a long time to see Episode 9. I waited a few weeks and I went to see it, and I kind of shrugged, and I was like, it's fine. But there's nothing, there's no real sort of risk taking there. I feel there are so many ways. Okay, do you want me to tell you what I would do? Like, here's my little sort of like crazy little dream. If I were the head of Lucasfilm right now, this is what I would do. I would take $500 million, so $500 million. And I would pick the 5 most exciting filmmakers from the Star Wars generation who grew up Star Wars, were super excited about this. But I'm talking people like the Safdie brothers,
Josh Trank, Josh Trank,
sure, yeah, Jordan Peele, whoever, just like these different genders, races, or whatever, and I would give each of them $100 million and the script of the original Star Wars, and say, Here's the script. Here's the original. Here's your $100 million, And I don't want to talk to you until you've made a film. So you cast it the way you want, you shoot it the way you want. If you want to do animation, you do animation, whatever you want to do. And you pick a release date, and you release all 5 reboots of the original Star Wars at the same time. In theater. So first of all, you're killing the rest of the market, right? Everybody's got, forget the other studios. You can give a pass to like hardcore Star Wars fans to, like maybe a discount to watch all 5. And then you have this global voting on, like from fans around the world to vote on their favorite one. And then the top one by the fans gets to reboot Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and then you go from there.
I would like to see one all in another language, like all with Korean.
Sure,
like
that'd be awesome.
A Korean director, all Korean actors,
in black and white or something. Like some crazy stuff.
I have a couple of comments on that. First of all, I think it's a brilliant idea. It's cheap. You could do it Joker style. When you talk about Todd Phillips and what he accomplished with Joker. I mean, it was made for $55 million, $60 million. Yeah. And the way he convinced Joaquin Phoenix to do it is like, think of it as the greatest heist film. We're just going to take this money and do what we want, because he was right. He took something. He had all the sort of enough of the genre stuff there.
Yeah.
But basically a whole think piece on mental illness and how we and desire just to be loved in society,
right.
and how what will happen to people that are disenfranchised if there's not acceptance.
Sure.
And I think that you could do that. I mean, famously it's been reported he wanted to do like a DC Black Label, and the Black Label would be where you do these sort of low budget versions. He said that he had a couple other directors and some properties connected to them. That makes a lot of sense. And there's that, what is it? Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it called Star Wars Uncut? Or is it Empire Uncut?
Yeah, Star Wars Uncut, yeah.
Where they took I think it was, they had like, everyone had a 7-second sequence, and they remade all of Star Wars and all of Empire. I don't know if they ever did.
That was Casey Pugh who did that.
Yes.
That's such a brilliant idea. It's a beautiful project. It's
a
beautiful project.
I think it's free. You can watch it somewhere.
Star Wars
Uncut. But it's all different medium. It's, cutout animation, puppets, live action, all done with dogs.
We talk about it actually in the People vs. George Lucas. He's on it, and we show some of it. And by the way, it's on Hulu right now. People vs. George is back on Hulu. So
we're just, how many plugs we're just gonna do? We're gonna make a little ding noise every time a plug goes in.
Well, I'm not making any money on it, so but
don't do that.
But
Bobby.
it is on Hulu.
Don't do that, Bobby. I was just joking. Bobby's our engineer who's who's also very, very cinema savvy himself. But I just feel when I look at Star Wars, it's become a brand that has become it's about, and I don't know if you've been to the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland.
No.
I've been, and it's...
How is it?
Okay.
That's what I'm saying is it's
boring, actually. There's not... To me, there's like... It's
predictable.
It's a shopping mall. It's a shopping mall with a couple of restaurants and two rides now. So I haven't been on that new ride. Disneyland's too expensive. It's too expensive now. It's not... It used to be fun where you could just go on a day, on a whim, on a Tuesday, and it's now crowded every Tuesday. There's no off time. But what I'm saying is they really missed the mark, because the way people fell in love with Star Wars was the original trilogy, and all of that has been kind of stripped. It's this sort of generic planet, It's.
I mean, I understand the this sort of innate desire that you have this multi-billion-dollar franchise and you want to play it safe. I understand that conceptually, but also, I mean, think about this for a second, right? Star Wars is truly, really the brand that you cannot break. Case in point, The Phantom Menace. Like, The Phantom Menace could have broken the franchise. It did not. It survived The Phantom Menace. So you could literally throw everything you want at the wall. It will still somehow work. So why not take risks?
Well, that's the thing is, like, in retrospect, The Phantom Menace, with now the passage of time, it's been 20 years. It's not as it's I don't know, it's kind of aged better than other films.
I don't know if I'm with you there, man.
You don't know?
It's still, as you said, and I will quote you from the People vs. George Lucas. It's a lot of meetings.
Right. Yes. Write what you know.
Yeah.
Write what you know. George Lucas had a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
He had a lot of meetings. You were talking about what you would do with Star Wars. I love all that. Have you seen the Phantom edits of Star Wars?
Oh, well, I've seen some. There's like 100 of them.
There's a whole bunch of different ones. I love that there's two big changes that were made that I think could actually change that movie. Yeah. That change it for the better. I had a whole conversation with Topher Grace about his cut. Which he promises he's going to come on the podcast. We're going to talk about it. Oh, cool. So Topher, you're gonna keep that promise for me. Yeah. But two changes. One, in one of the re-edits, they just subtitle Jar Jar. And Jar Jar's from this proud warrior race. They cut out all the dumb stuff that Jar Jar, the sort of comedic antics, and Jar Jar's from this proud warrior race. The Gungans, we are warriors. Okay. We will come at the Trade Federation. And his voice is like this weird alien voice, and he's subtitled, and you're like, whoa, Jar Jar, dude. Changes everything, because what a lot of people don't realize is Jar Jar is the voice of Barney the dinosaur. That is the interpretation, was Barney the dinosaur. And as a parent at the time with young kids, I remember that shrill Barney the dinosaur voice was something I could never be in the room more than 20 seconds when my kids were watching that. And so like that as the take on the voice, because let's be honest, Yoda is Grover from Sesame Street. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So change Jar Jar's subtitle him, and what I always thought would have been kind of a cool thing is if at the end of Phantom Menace, when they're all celebrating and the uniting of the two peoples, the Gungans and the surface dwellers from Naboo, have come together, and in celebration of this fact, we will rename our planet Alderaan. And I always thought that would have been a much cooler way to end the film. Yeah. But you have Boss Noss, whatever he's. I think that would have been a more like a sort of dark and foreboding thing. It's just I feel like there's just a lot of missed opportunity, especially when you look at the, and this is with everything, when you look at the there's sort of floated around that Duel of the Fates, Colin Trevorrow, Star Wars Episode 9 original script, which seems better. Who knows how it would have been an execution. But the production art, there's so many abandoned ideas that were incredible in all of those art books, which I do plan to get that book. Yeah. I'm not sure I'm going to buy the movie, but I'm going to buy the Rise of Skywalker art book. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing too. I mean, obviously, I don't mean to be harsh on it, because there's a lot of amazing artists and amazing thinkers and all of, involved in these movies, but they're huge machines, obviously, and I think that I really think that the Star Wars universe, the Star Wars franchise would benefit from just trying different things a little bit more, and hopefully they will.
I was why not? Yeah, I was upset that in the sequel trilogy, no one gets an arm or a limb chopped off. I thought it was really kind of weak, because that was a Star Wars trope, like, I've got a bad feeling about this. Someone's going to get a hand or an arm or a leg or something chopped off. What if Rey had mechanical legs after they were chopped off? That would have been such an amazing choice. She's disabled. Yeah. I mean, it would have, I don't know.
No, I mean, that's a great idea. I mean, to me, but really what bothered me the most, I think, watching Episode 9 was I felt for about 80% of the film that you it's like it was rehashing the classic Star Wars beats that we all know, to the point where literally you can think of the line they're going to say before they say it, and sure enough they say it, and that's
they fly now. Yeah, they fly now. That's right. They fly now. Yeah.
It's whatever.
Yeah. Boy. Okay, so you and I are incapable of getting together and having a conversation that does not derail into Star Wars. This is just...
Well, you set me up.
I did say... Well, you made a movie.
I know.
You made a movie. It's your...
I know.
But look, I think...
if people derive fun from the Star Wars franchise, I mean, great. Whatever. I'm not... all I'm trying to say is there's a lot more out there than
that's
those franchises.
That's my whole point, is that, like, if you're sort of living in the bubble of just like Star Wars, you're not gonna be very satisfied. Although Mandalorian, I think is for what it is. I think it's fine. Yeah, I enjoyed it. There are a couple episodes that were exceptional, where I had a better time watching that than Rise of Skywalker, for sure. But I feel like if you have a diversified media diet, I feel like that you just are going to be happier about everything.
Of course,
yeah. So, okay. I really think that you need to do, because I feel like now, especially with what could the George Lucas Star Wars 7, 8, and 9 could have been. in people's mind's eye. Whether he decides to publish that himself, maybe he could not. Whatever would happen with that, I feel like you got to reapproach George, and you have to do the ultimate George Lucas conversation, like what you did with Friedkin.
If he'll talk to me, I just I don't know. Again, what I've heard is that he's not very happy with the existence of the People versus George Lucas, which I think is a shame. But yeah, I would totally be game. I think he's a fascinating guy. I've always been really. I mean, look, as you said, People versus George really fundamentally is a love letter, to him and to what he's done. If he's willing to sit down, I will absolutely do it, and I would totally honor his process and want to dig deep and get to figure out what he's all about, for sure.
Well, I think, you know what?
We need a petition is what we need.
We need a petition. How do you, like, William Friedkin, you ran into at a party and he yelled at you. So how do we get you up to Marin County?
Right.
Maybe you run into each other at the coffee.
You set it up, like a blind date.
Yeah, like a meet cute. You could make it like a meet cute. You and George Lucas. But I really think that look, I guess the problem he would have is the title, because let's be honest, he hasn't seen the film.
I don't know.
Do you think he's actually seen it?
I think he has.
Really?
I mean, come on. If you had a film out there called The People versus Chris Gord, would you not see it?
I would watch the first few minutes and I would just be like, no, turn it off.
You'd be curious.
I don't want to. No,
right?
I can't.
Really?
I can't. Yeah, I don't listen to this podcast or watch it after it's done. It's when it's done, I know I lived it. I don't need to rehear it.
I'd be curious. if there was
the People versus Alexander Philippe.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. But I think that what this is an opportunity for, because I think here's the thing is this audience has grown up. This audience, the Star Wars audience, is smart. They are savvy.
Right.
And they are passionate.
Yes.
And I feel like Star Wars has not kept up with the audience. That I think is the issue. And I think that what we're ready for is Dune.
Arrakis. Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah.
Am I pronouncing that correctly? Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve, yeah.
Did I get it?
Villeneuve. That's the French.
Is the French? Okay.
It's the French way of saying it. So I don't know how the Canadian
I took Spanish in
say
college.
It, but it's Villeneuve in French. Yeah.
Villeneuve, okay.
But I'm very excited about that. I think it's the time may be right for a great Dune.
Right.
I'm hoping it's a really hard novel or series of novels to turn into movies. Clearly, because it hasn't been properly done, really. And I say this with all the love and that I have for David Lynch. But yeah, let's see what happens with Denis Villeneuve. Yeah.
My hope is that based on everything I've read, this is an adult Star Wars in a sense. And if I've read the novel 4 times. I read it every year in high school, and God, I should read it again. But I feel like parts of it I have memorized. It's so ingrained in my head. Yeah. Dune was just such an influence, and the David Lynch one, yes, it's flawed in many ways. Not due to, but David's vision for it was so different.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's some really, really cool, interesting things about it. No question.
Okay, wait a second. You're going to tell me what the next movie you're working on. What is it? Can you say anything?
Well, there's a few things. Right now, we're in production on a film about actually shifting gears totally. Like it's about John Ford and Monument Valley, and it's about the myth of the West. It's kind of a deconstruction of the myth of the West through a literally frame by frame deconstruction of the way that he uses the monuments in his 6 major westerns.
Wow.
So so that's I'm really, really excited about this one. We're in production right now, and then we got some other stuff. We're doing some stuff for the Criterion Collection and some other projects that we have in development right now that I'm very excited about. So. Yeah.
Are you concerned that, to bring it all back to Leap of Faith here, are you concerned that Leap of Faith would be confused with other movies called Leap of Faith? Because when you look it up on IMDb, there are some
There's a few. Yeah.
There's a few. I mean, they don't have William Friedkin in the title.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's why we added the subtitle, William Friedkin on The Exorcist. Mm-hmm. It is the title that made the most sense for me right now. So it's stuck, and we'll see what happens. But yeah.
Well, you are actually. I mean, you're headed to Sundance.
Tomorrow actually. Flying in the morning. So yeah.
What's your hope for what people are going to take away from Leap of Faith?
I've been fortunate to get that audience reaction already because we actually premiered at the Venice Film Festival back in September. We've had a few other international screenings. I was in Taipei at the Taipei Golden Horse with it. It went to Mar del Plata in Argentina. It was in Paris recently. So I've experienced BFI London, and the reaction has really been great. People seem to have a real sort of emotional connection, and I think again, there's the film sort of builds up towards this final sequence, which takes place in Kyoto, Japan. Which people are probably thinking, well, what is the connection between Kyoto, Japan, and The Exorcist? Well, you should watch Leap of Faith, right. and it's a really emotional ending, which I think gets to the core of William Friedkin, not just as a filmmaker, but as a human being, and I think it's a beautiful moment, and he went into this just beautiful monologue about Kyoto. And when he delivered that, like on the spot, I knew, one, this is the way that the movie has to end, and two, we have to go to Kyoto and film. And I'm really glad that we did, because I think it takes the movie to a whole other level. So I think even hardcore fans of The Exorcist or William Friedkin are going to get, to me, it's not about how many new facts I'm bringing to the table. It's about looking at the meaning of the film and looking at his process and his mind's eye as a filmmaker. I think people are going to see him through a completely different lens after watching Leap of Faith.
Well, one of the things I've just admired about you is in your previous life, you're a professor.
Yeah, sure.
And are you still teach at all?
Well, you know what I do, because I love to teach, and I love to teach because it's you get as much from the students as you give, or sometimes more. So, because I don't have time, obviously, to do it, but I will do these master classes now, either on the festival circuit or at museums or universities. I'll do some special screenings. In fact, I was recently at SCAD Atlanta, and I did a couple of days, and we did, I did a master class on the meaning of horror cinema, and showed, memory, and did a Q&A. So I do these like kind of special events, and I love to do that, and I want to do more of that, because it's a way to keep me on my toes. It keeps me engaged. It gives me new ideas. That conversation to me between, like that I can have with not just audiences but students or whatever, to me is a constant reminder of why I do what I do and why we do what we do at Exhibited Pictures. And those films, I think, are resonating, I think, with people. And it's hard. It's really hard to make those films. We never have the support that we need financially, and so it's a reminder that I'm doing this for the right reasons. But it's never easy.
Well, I mean, it is like one of the things that I know filmmakers, having spoken to so many filmmaker friends, that
Sure.
They struggle with is just maintaining a regular living. And being a filmmaker.
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, you make these movies, and sometimes you invest a lot of your own personal, money into them, which, Leap of Faith right now, we own, and that's the beauty of it. And we're being very cautious about where it's going to go. And we've, we have to be cautious based on our past, And, but yeah, I think it's really, you put a lot of yourself into it. And unfortunately, we live in a world where I think there's a lot of people out there who are looking to profit from filmmakers, and I think that's fine. I understand that if you're going to put money into a film, you want to see that money back, and it's perfectly natural. But there's, I think, a bit of a disconnect because what filmmakers put into it, the sweat equity, is just as valuable as the money you're putting into it. And I think that if anything, we've learned now that we are not going to accept deals where companies don't give us a corridor where we can recoup the money at the same time as they are recouping theirs. It's only natural. Why should the filmmakers take all the risk, and why should companies be able to just swoop in, give you money for it, recoup their money right away, get their expenses, get their percentage on the top, and then what? And then you get the scraps. that's really not okay.
There are some companies out there that I think do a more fair split with filmmakers, but we're gonna have a discussion about that on another podcast, because I know you live in Los Angeles now. So
I spend a lot of time. I'm still very much a nomad. I still travel a lot, but I spend more and more time here. I might move here eventually. I don't know. The jury's still out, but I probably will move close to LA. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Good. Well, there's some cheap areas outside of LA.
Okay.
Good. Alexander Philippe, wish you so much success on Leap of Faith.
Thank you very much.
William Friedkin on The Exorcist. Thank you for doing the Film Star Podcast.
My pleasure.